President Biden traveled to Detroit Wednesday to highlight his infrastructure package to Michigan residents. The president toured a General Motors electric vehicle assembly plant where he discussed how the deal will expand on the infrastructure needed to charge electric cars while also helping fight climate change and creating jobs.
We're going to make sure that the jobs of the future end up here in Michigan, not halfway around the world. You know, that means that here in Detroit, you're going to set a new pace for electric vehicles. This is not hyperbole, this is a fact. With this infrastructure law, along with my Build Back Better plan, we're going to kickstart new batteries, materials, and parts production and recycling, boosting the manufacturing of clean vehicles with new loans and new tax credits, creating new purchase incentives for consumers to buy American-made, union-made clean vehicles.
Mr. Biden has been on a victory lap of sorts this week with visits to Michigan and New Hampshire after signing the bipartisan infrastructure deal into law. The administration is hoping this will generate much-needed momentum for passing the $1.75 trillion Build Back Better Act. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins me now. Nancy, how does Michigan specifically stand to benefit from what's in the infrastructure package?
Well, there's a lot in that package for automakers and auto workers to like, because not only are there tax credits specifically in the bill to help people pay for electric vehicles that are made here in the United States. So we're talking about the Detroit automakers here, but also there's $7.5 billion in the bill solely to construct more electronic vehicle charging stations around the country. An acknowledgement that if you're really going to rev up, pardon the pun, the use of EVs in this country, you've got to make it easier for people to charge those vehicles. And right now, it isn't all that cost effective, not all that profitable for gas stations, for instance, to put in an EV charging station. And so this money will go a long way towards helping that, a long way towards a future that many automakers know is coming, but that certainly isn't here yet, because fewer than 2% of cars sold right now, Lana, are electric vehicles. So, you know, it is an industry that is on its way, but the White House argued it needs a little help, and that's why there's so much money in the infrastructure package that is specifically set aside for EVs.
Speaking of Michigan, obviously it's a battleground state. We know that there's a lot of deliberation that goes into selecting places that the president goes to tout his domestic agenda. Do you expect that we'll see the president traveling there more ahead of the 2022 midterms, Nancy?
He does seem to like to travel to Michigan a lot, doesn't he? I mean, he's been there several times since becoming president. Obviously, it's a somewhat easy day trip when you've got Air Force One to travel in. And beyond that, he's very comfortable there, similar to the way he's very comfortable in Pennsylvania, where he grew up for part of his life, because, you know, it's got a large working class population that he identifies with. And he knows that Michigan is going to be a big battleground state in the next election. So electorally, it's important in the 2022 midterms as well. Beyond that, you know, even setting electronic vehicles aside, there's a lot in this bill for Michiganders to like, especially because Flint, Michigan was sort of the epicenter of problems with clean drinking water, and there are billions of dollars in this bill to help replace lead pipes to make drinking water safer. So that's something that the president highlighted today, along with all the other benefits like money for roads and bridges and ports and the like.
You know, obviously, when we're discussing the Democrats and 2022, much of that's going to be dependent. Much of their talking points will be dependent on what happens in both the House and the Senate when it comes to the Build Back Better Act. And we know that the House is poised to debate it on Thursday and a possible vote as soon as Friday. Are Democrats currently confident that they have enough votes to pass the measure in the lower chamber?
I think they feel cautiously confident that as long as the Congressional Budget Office comes back with a report on this bill that more or less resembles the claims that the White House has been making about how much it's going to cost and how much revenue it'll raise, as long as the CBO score doesn't provide any new major surprises, yes, Democrats have gotten some assurances from the moderate members of their caucus in the House that they are going to be on board to pass that. But, you know, I have to say that CBO score is still a bit of a mystery. It's not that unusual for a White House to sort of paint a rosy picture and say, here's a bill that is going to raise, you know, $1 trillion, only to have the CBO come back and say, well, actually, we crunched the numbers and we think it's only going to raise about $500 billion. And then you've got a big gap to make up. And it's always possible that some of those centrists could tap the brakes and say, hey, wait a minute, this bill doesn't do exactly what you said it would. We want to make some changes before we vote. So a lot of Democrats here in Washington kind of holding their breaths right now, watching to see what those number crunchers at the CBO come back with. Another thing that's really interesting, Lana, was today in Michigan, the president, right off the bat in his speech, made the case that neither his infrastructure bill or this Build Back Better bill are going to raise inflation, that they're going to contribute to inflationary pressures. Clearly, there is an understanding here at the White House that that is an argument being made by Republicans that is working its way into the public discourse. And so the president felt the need right off the bat to make the argument that these bills are going to be good for the economy, not bad.
Certainly, we have heard that as a through line coming from Republican talking points, which, of course, Nancy, leads to questions about the Senate and the fate of Build Back Better there. What's the current timeline for a vote, and how likely is it to pass?
Right. So, as you know, Senator Manchin has been talking a lot about the fact that he's worried that another large stimulus bill could add to inflation. So that is an issue. Another big issue is that while Democrats in the House want to see the CBO score, in the Senate, it's really crucial that the numbers add up. If Democrats want to use this process known as reconciliation so that they can pass the bill just with Democratic votes, just with 51 votes, they need to pass a bill according to the rules that does not add to the deficit. And so if the CBO says that this bill actually costs more money than it raises, then they've got to go back to the drawing board and work on it and get those numbers to match. And so that could cause a delay as well. And then, of course, there's the fact that if the Senate bill looks any different from the House bill, then you got to go back and pass it in the House again. So we are a number of steps away from the finish line here.
Yes, of course. Before I let you go, Nancy, real quick, I want to ask you about Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's comments that the U.S. might not be able to pay its bills after December 15th. How is Congress planning to address this looming issue?
Right. You'll recall that a couple of months ago, Congress, as it so often does, kicked the can down the road. There was this big standoff between Democrats and Republicans over raising the debt ceiling. Republicans were arguing that Democrats should have to do it all by themselves without Republican votes, which is something that that takes a lot of time, that Democrats didn't want to set a precedent for doing. So in the end, they all agreed to disagree and avert financial catastrophe and kick things down the road till December. Well, guess what? December is almost here. You've seen absolutely no movement on that issue. And so what we'll be watching to see is whether there is yet another game of chicken that gets played between Democrats and Republicans, or if Democrats decide, hey, we're on the verge of getting our big Build Back Better plan passed. Let's just sort of kind of, just deal with it and go ahead and try to raise the debt ceiling by ourselves, just so we can avert what would surely be economic catastrophe if the U.S. could not pay its bills. And in fact, even Treasury Secretary Yellen has said recently that that's one way to do it, and any way that you do it is just fine with her. So that is another drama at the Capitol that's going to be playing out over the next few weeks.
Okay. All right, Nancy, I share a little bit of the disbelief that we're already looking at December right around the corner, but understand that Congress can't be so cavalier in their attitudes. Appreciate you coming on to talk to us.
That's why December is always exciting on Capitol Hill. You never know exactly when they're going to wrap up their work and go home.
Absolutely. Nancy Cordes, appreciate it.
You got it.